Hey Ubers, welcome to Make Ahead Monday. This is the last Valentine's Day card for this year, but not the last love card. I have a piece of brown cardstock and Stampers Anonymous Tim Holtz stamp, and that's called Papillon. It's very malleable. I haven't used his stamps before, but I purchased this a while back with my coupon, 40% off or 50% off coupon at Aaron Brothers. And I'm using Colorbox Pigment ink in Frost White, and I'm going to lay my piece of Kraft cardstock on top of it, and that's a standard size. That's 5.5 by 4.25. This card this week is going to have a lot of texture, so if you like texture, hopefully you'll be into this one. This time I'm using a Brayer because I just want to make sure I get a good image stamped on there. And sometimes with my fingers I get paranoid that I missed a spot. And you're going to want to set that aside to dry for quite a while. I'd give it a couple of hours, and I'm just showing this part because I think it's important to keep your stamps in good condition. I wipe baby wipes over my stamps right after I use them every time. Those especially were not cheap, but I was able to use a coupon on it, so I was pleased about that. So I'm going to put that aside, and I pulled out some tracing paper. I saw some people using vellum on the various forums that I visit, and I don't have vellum. I will go pick some up, but I figured, tracing paper would be nice, and it's very affordable. I'm using my Hero Art stamp set called Amour, and I'm using that stamp set like crazy for this Valentine's Day season, and I'm using the word Amour. I'm using Colorbox brown pigment ink. I found that the dye inks don't work very well with the tracing paper, especially for sentiments, because it kind of bleeds. Oh, you get to see my bed head. I was rushing down to see you guys because I wanted to get this video out today. And I'm in my PJs, but not my penguin PJs. I'm in my doggy PJs, so you can admire that while this video goes on. So this is Coordination's Whitewash collection. I picked it up at my local hobby store, and I really love it. I played around with it during the weekend. It's not white core, it's craft core. And, depending on your project, you might like this. The paint comes off very easily, and it's got a nice grainy texture on the top. So even if you did nothing to it, it's still got a lot of texture. So I'm going to make a sloppy little square, about 3 inches. And I want to see all that brown paper along the edges. I want this card to have kind of a shabby feel to it. So I'm peeling off in such a way so that the brown really shows along the edges. So this card is going to come together slowly, but you'll see what, as we get towards the end, you'll see it all come together. So I'm crushing it up as much as possible because I want to see all of those lines that are starting to magically appear. And then I'm going to take my sanding block and sand over, and you can sand over to your heart's content, but I just wanted to thoroughly reveal the craft core underneath that whitewashed surface. The paint kind of goes flying. It's got to go somewhere. And I'm using a Tim Holtz distressing tool along the edges. It's nice because it's got those surfaces that stick out that prevent you from injuring yourself. If your paper in the crevice, it just creates a really raw edge. So I'm going to show this to you once. We're going to do it again on the card base, but I'm not going to show that to you because this is a long video. I tried my best to make it short, you guys, but my focal image is one of those focal images that has a lot of detail. But I'm really excited about what I came up with. So I can't wait to show you that. So here we've got a little square, or kind of rectangle, that's very distressed. I'm going to use Tim Holtz's Distress Ink in tea dye, and just push the edges of my piece up against the ink pad. I want it to be dark, especially on the corners, so I'll just sit with it for a little bit when I reach the corners. And I did this step after crushing it up and doing all the sanding because I want to make the very edges and the raised portions dark, like it would happen naturally. I'm very lightly going over the top surface with my blending tool, just so I can get those ridges darkened. And if it ends up being too dark for your liking, you can go ahead and put your sanding block on top of it again to get rid of it. I'm just going to do it a little bit in the center. And then you can see all that fun texture close up that's happening. So once again, there have been a couple of videos that I've made that I really limit myself in the use of color. Here I'm staying very muted, and you'll see where I choose to put the color in this card. So I'm using some Martha Stewart scissors. They create Fringe, and I'm going back to this Coordinations whitewashed collection paper. And that whole section I'm going to go ahead and cut out, making sure to leave a little area large enough for my fingers to hold on to the pieces that I'm going to cut out. So there's maybe like a centimeter in addition to where the fringes end. Just enough for you to hold on to it because you're going to be doing some detailed work here. A little bit fussy, but I hope the result will be worthwhile. So I'm going back to my Distress Ink in Victorian Velvet. I've been going to that one for my Valentine's Day cards. It's a real pretty muted pink. And I'm laying the ends of those fringes into the ink pad and pushing down at the very end with my small scissors. I want it to be dark at the very end. If you end up accidentally getting ink on other portions of the fringe, don't worry about it. It's not really going to show. And this whole card has a very rough, raw feel to it in some ways, so just don't even worry about it. I was a little bit obsessive compulsive, so I wiped off those little marks that happened higher up on the fringe. So you're going to cut this piece into smaller pieces. Each piece should have about 3 strips of fringe on it. If you were to do this process with each individual piece of fringe, it would be ridiculously painstaking, so I'm trying to save you a few steps. So about 3 fringes per piece. So just send your snips down all the way. And then you're going to, I got this tool, it's a stylus, I guess you'd call it. It's used for the dry embossing in Martha Stewart's art crafts station. I got it as a gift for Christmas. I don't really use the station, but I do use this stylus. And I wrapped that piece around the stylus to create a curly cue. So you want to have the craft side in and the white side out. And you're going to feel it out like I'm feeling it out right here. You want to make sure the tip catches inside and then roll it all the way up. And then pull out your stylus, if possible, so that the curly cue lengthens. And you're going to do this for all the pieces. So I curled all of those fringes, and I'm going to use these. I'm going to adhere them to my bloom, and they're going to be sort of my representation of stamens. I don't know if you've ever looked deeply inside of a bloom, but that's like sometimes my favorite part. Anyway, I cut out more tracing paper using my Sizzix Flower Layers number 5. I only cut out the small bloom because I found that the larger bloom was a little bit too big for my card face. And I'm crushing each one up. I'm not going to show all of this, but so you're going to do that to all of them except for 3. And then carefully uncrumple it. It's kind of a fragile paper, so you want to be careful. Use a light hand. And I'm going to zoom in, and you can see all that wonderful texture. That wrinkled effect gives me a sense of a bloom that's just past its prime, maybe one that's just fallen off the tree or the plant. And that's more interesting to me than the fresh ones. I just want to show you what happens if you don't crumple it. If you don't crumple it and then you spritz it with whatever spray you have, the petals are going to curl, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to spritz it with Studio Calico Mr. Huey's spritz. It's in the color Piglet, and it's a very beautiful pink. And I was so pleased with what happened. If you look, the color is really settling into all the crevices. What I did with another flower was I rubbed one flower onto another to make the effect more subtle. But for this one, I just wanted to go all the way with it. And so I just spritzed it, and I didn't rub. So here's a close-up. And if you can see it, it looks almost vascular. And I was mentioning before how, you know, I love to look at things very close up. A lot of my photography is the same way, in sort of a macro fashion. And I used to know what that vascularity, how the whole vascular system of a flower worked. But many years of doing other things that were required, but not necessarily things that fed my soul, meant that I forgot how it all worked. But I want to get back to my botany books and remember. Anyway, so I'm layering plain pieces with the painted pieces, with the spritzed pieces. And I'm also putting those curly cues on there with each layer. I decided to do a painted piece and alternate that with 2 white pieces. So a painted piece and 2 white pieces. And just keep adding those curly cues where it seems appropriate. I mean, where it pleases you. The nice thing about these curly cues is they force the paper to lift off the page. They force those petals to go upward instead of laying flat, like a flower would. So I was just really excited that was a sort of side effect of including this in my flower. And so these aren't like real stamens. I'm not attempting to copy nature here. But they are kind of Tim Burton-esque. Once the flower's all done, that's how I felt. And once you get close to being done, you might want to just make those pieces individual. So I'm using a Tombow Mono Multi-Glue. I experimented with other forms of adhesive, but this worked and didn't create bulk. Okay, and one more white piece. So you can see how those petals are just naturally being lifted off because I strategically put those curlicues onto the bloom. So this is a 1-inch circle. Just a scrap I cut out of cardstock, and I need that to create some stability in my flower. And here are the 3 flower layers that I didn't do anything to. And I'm folding it in half, and I'm folding it again and again. And now I'm going to fold it so that you have a little triangle there. And then I just squinched it in right there. Okay, I have 3 of those, and those are going to make my innermost petals, which are usually the tightest ones in the bloom. They haven't unfurled yet. Now this gets kind of fiddly, and the reason I'm struggling a little bit here is because my fingers got too sticky, and I needed to stop and sort of dry them off and get that glue off of there. But it all works in the end. And then I'm going to take a 3/4 inch circle that was a scrap. You're not going to see it, so it doesn't really matter what color it is. It's Kraft though. And put that in the center. I took a button that I had in my stash. I think I got it in downtown LA. And I'm just threading some Twinery twine through the center. Now this is going to add another level of texture, and will be a little surprise to find in the inside of your bloom. I'm intentionally leaving that tie totally loose because I'm going to string several more pieces of twine in underneath that before tightening. Okay, so I'm ready to tighten. I'm going to pull that taut, and then I'm going to tie it again just to make sure those other pieces don't go anywhere. And then I'm just going to chop them all off at the same place so that they're all the same length. So this is very much like stamens. I'm actually going to untwine the twine so that you have your individual fibers. And there you go. I didn't want to waste your time by showing you that part. And then I'm going to take glue dots. These have a lot of stick. And then I'm just going to place that right in the middle, right on top of the Kraft cardstock, so you don't end up seeing that at all. And then I'm just going to push those pieces in there really tight. When you're finally finished with the card, you can play around with those stamens to make sure they're sticking out in a way that you like. And then I'm going to put some more Tombow Mono Multi in the center. I put it on the back of my pink circle, and just place that in the center of your bloom. So because of the materials I used, I feel like this flower really has a lot of texture. And the whole card becomes a very tactile experience. And I was even thinking, I mean, this could be cheesy, but I mean, it depends on your style. You could even spritz some perfume in there if you wanted to, because, you know, if it's for your man. Okay, so I'm going to use that tea dye again. I'm not going to show it all to you. And just age the edges a little bit, especially down the long sides, because the stamp wasn't large enough to cover that area. And once that's done, send that distress tool down all the sides as well. And then go ahead and press the edges of your card base into the tea dye stamp pad. And I just love that edge that I created. In the end, this card felt very organic, as if, you know, over the years the elements had done their work on the card, and yet the bloom still remained very fresh. So that could be very symbolic of, you know, a love that is has been shared between a couple for many years. This could even be a good, you know, anniversary card, like when it gets to the 20th and 30th anniversary. It sure did require a lot of work, so it would be meaningful for that significant of an occasion. So I'm taking some of my favorite burlap ribbon, and I'm going to use my Chevron Reinterpreted technique on it. I'm not going to show it to you here because I have another video on YouTube that explains how I did it. And that video is called Chevron Reinterpreted. So you can go ahead and watch that. I'll put the link in the description below. So if you want to go ahead and see that once the video is done, you can. And I'm going to put a glue dot on the base of this flower just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. I had played around with tying a little knot, you know, the kind of knot that I do in a lot of my cards, but I felt like it was a little bit too much, and that I wanted the chevron to show, and if I had placed a bow there, that wouldn't have worked. So my sentiment is ready to be manipulated. It's dry, and I'm going to fold in those edges And because I'm getting into a tiny little space, I'm not going to use my big ATG. I'm going to use my miniature tape dispenser that's broken to make sure that stays where it needs to. I really enjoy using adhesive that's small like this, but I keep having to buy more, and quite often the dispenser breaks on me. So that's very frustrating. See how that happened? So I have to constantly pull that out. I'm going to put a little dab of adhesive so that my sentiment stays in place while I affix my eyelets. And I was happy that I was able to use the tracing paper because it's translucent and you can still get a sense of the texture and the work that went into doing the piece underneath it. So those are some grommets, and this is an eyelet and grommet setter from We Are Memory Keepers. It's nice because it's got that deep crevice inside, so if you want to put an eyelet well into the center of your work, whether it be a card or a scrapbooking layout, it can get there. Now I'm just marking with a pencil because I want to be very precise in my placement of the eyelets. And this is a 1/8 inch eyelet, so I've got that top notch set to 1/8. And it's going to pierce a hole in your work. It's a very powerful instrument, actually. It's bulky, but it's a good thing to have, especially if you like to use eyelets and grommets. So I'm pushing my eyelet in through the hole that was made, and then I'm pushing that knob at the top to the front and pressing it flat. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. So I'm doing this intentionally before I adhere this piece to my cardstock. Otherwise, to my card base, just a plain white card base, because otherwise those eyelets will make holes in the inside of your card, which you might not want. And I thought, in the spirit of the card, it would be best to just rip off those edges rather than cut notches. So this card base, I actually cut smaller than a standard card because I don't want it to show. So it's 5 1/4 by 4. And I put my snail down from my Scotch ATG, and I'm adhering that so that none of the white from the card peeks out the sides. And that's your basic card. It's such a long video, I decided not to include detail shots of this card, but you're welcome to visit me on my blog. I'm going to be posting pictures there. And subscribe there if you'd like. Please subscribe here. I'd love to increase my audience for card making and share with you what I've been doing. I can't wait to see what you guys have done if you had any Valentine's Day cards. But happy Valentine's Day. I hope you're sharing it with loved ones. And I hope you enjoyed this card. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you next time. Bye.